928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Stumbling down the road with Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff as she carries stones, digs holes, and wheels her shovels on her way. This road is the real path. It is never easy and never clear, but always entertaining. This journey has not been a seated event, as Bridgette walks, runs, stumbles, carries, digs, drags, laughs, fights, sings, prays, dances, kicks, screams, and oftentimes falls.
Hey everybody, this is Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. I am the host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show, and I've been, on Saturdays for over a year, and this is the third week where I have also added Wednesdays to my show, because I just have so many amazing, interesting people that I like to talk to and like to have on my show, so I needed more space and more time. Anyway, so today we are going to be discussing a lot of different things. Mostly, we'll probably start out the conversation with healing and art, art health. I'm going to call it art health with my guest. Remember that we here at Revolution Radio are 100% listener supported. So you can go to our website, which is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and you can click on the funding area and find all kinds of amazing ways that you can actually fund Revolution Radio. Everything that we do here, all the hosts, people that do the background stuff, the people that keep the website up, keep our channel up through these rocky periods on the internet, all do it 100% voluntarily, and we do it because we all feel like we have information and education and amazing guests that we want to bring to the forefront for you. So please find ways to donate. We have a lot of heirloom seeds. You can just throw us a few bucks if you want. I advertise on our network on the webpage and for my online healthcare business. And that works. So that's how I support Revolution Radio as well and support my business. And I think that is about it. So I'm on Carrying Stones, in case you're listening to this on Wednesday. I'm on Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, you can go to the website and you can click on the bee. You'll see this amazing bee that has all this pollen all over it flying towards a flower as the thumbnail picture, and you can click on that and then you can find information about me and a whole bunch of links to my websites and contact information if you want to contact me or learn more about me and more about the show. So you can do that as well. And then so I'm also on Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, so let's rip roar with the show. Kelsey, are you there?
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, and just for people out there, just in case we hear a little other, activity, Kelsey has her son with her today. So sometimes that's just part of the show.
Thank you. I appreciate.
Yeah, well, sometimes you got animals in the background and chickens and dogs and cats. And so, kids are okay too, right?
Cool.
Yeah, because we live life in real time. So there we go. So we'll start the conversation kind of around, healing art, because you've kind of been involved with doing a lot of, health art. That's kind of like when I met you, you were kind of helping out at the hospital doing, healing art or health art or whatever kind of vocabulary you want to use. But you want to kind of give people, as long as you want, a history of kind of how you've gotten here.
Okay. As far as the work that I had done at the hospital here, I did art with kids in pediatrics, or art at the bedside, through a nonprofit program or nonprofit organization called Arts for All Nevada. That's a program started by Jackie Kennedy, but a national program. So they sent me into the hospital to do art with kids at the bedside. And now I don't say that I'm an art therapist, because that requires specific licensing. You have to go to school for that. It's a specific title. There's certain techniques and tools or whatever that art therapists use to be called an art therapist. I am, however, a psychologist. My bachelor's degree is in psychology, and I minored in art. I emphasized in painting. But I also studied media arts, graphic design, animation. Did an internship curating an art gallery in North Hollywood several years ago. And what else? I do all different sorts of arts, from performance art to independent film to, I would say, just about anything except for glass blowing and music. But I try to experience whatever creative outlets I can through different forms. I guess my most recent experience is that of being a mom and putting my creative energy into being a child, and how that relates to community and things as well. But I do have to be careful in saying that I'm not an art therapist. My master's degree is in transformative leadership through the California Institute of Integral Studies, and they're in San Francisco. They have one of the oldest online programs, I think, in the nation. And through that program, I got to focus my energy on creating something that was of my own focus. It's a very broad, very generalized topic that can be applied to anybody's individual styles when it comes to leadership. So I take that role as far as an entrepreneur and an artist and a community activist in different ways. And so through that, my focus was cultivating consciousness in creative communities. And so in getting to work with kids in the hospital, I also got to work with at-risk youth. So anyone from kindergarten to high school, or even with kids in juvenile detention. I've worked with adults with developmental disorders of different sorts and varieties, as well as average populations and people on the streets, that sort of thing, homeless people. But I like to teach art, use art as a therapeutic tool in different ways. But a lot of my focus with that is the cultivation of consciousness in the creative practice, or how people relate to art, or what's the point of making art in the first place if people have such profound experiences, or liberating experiences, or healing experiences, and then how through the power of the arts and through creation can we heal. I mean, that's what creation is. It's creating something new, healing something new, or healing something that's broken, or fixing something that was broken, or creating something out of nothing. And where do these ideas that come from nowhere come from, or how does that relate to channeling, or how does understanding consciousness and the light body and the creative process also relate to self-healing and regenesis? And then as far as leadership goes, if we can heal ourselves, and if through example is how we can ultimately teach and help others, then through healing the individual or healing the self, we also heal the community and vice versa. So I explore a lot of different relationships and how art not only heals the individual, but also heals communities or affects communities, or how it can have the opposite impact as well. So I focus a lot in my research in intention, and how intention, when it comes to consciousness or unconsciousness, affects the things that we create or say or do. And then through that, I guess trying to explore different ways to find empirical support behind why healing arts work in different forms, and what art is, and how different people can, I guess, express themselves through that. And what I really enjoy about you, Bridgette, is the way that you relate to healing in, I guess, your own unique way, or how you've integrated your own experiences, and how the integral process helps to create a health modality that works for individuals. Instead of trying to squeeze individuals into one little box, we have something that's adaptable to the person. Or what I like about the work that I get to do, and getting to meet and network with different sorts of individuals, and as well as what I found on my own, I guess, trauma recovery path, is that certain people and certain creative expressive tools can help with different things that you're going through at any different time. And it's really neat to see how different people, like you say, get to explore that in different ways. So I guess that's where I'm at, and kind of how I got to where I'm at now.
I like kind of the, trauma recovery. I mean, because I kind of think that's kind of like mostly what I do with people, is I'm recovering, their trauma, into the present now. And I think everybody has a level of trauma. I mean, even if you grow up in an Ozzie and Harriet family, that's really not healthy either, where everything's perfect. There are no bumps or, things that happen. But I feel everybody has post-traumatic stress disorder, and layers and layers and layers of it. And I feel like it comes from birth, the birth trauma first.
Yeah.
And that has to be recovered,
It's very spectrum, and I think that using the word trauma is a good way to encompass different forms of illness, because not only are we speaking about physical illness, there's like mental health, or if you get a chronic disease and you have to live with the trauma of that, or if you get hit by a car, or even just some big life radical change, like if you get a great new job on the other side of the world and have to move, that can be a traumatic experience, even though it's quote unquote positive.
Yeah, and then, rape, military, like we can the list of trauma goes on and on and on. Yeah. And even the most positive experiences can be the more, just as shell shocking.
Yeah. I think it's interesting the terminology that we choose to use through this. And how, and speaking about intentionality and health and healing and consciousness, it's important to be careful or specific, or at least intentional with the words that we use, because they can have different meanings towards different people. Because maybe a lot of people, I don't know, wouldn't think that they have gone through something traumatic, or there's a comparison of, I went through something that's more traumatic than what you went through, or, because I went through rape and you went through dealing with somebody who's been murdered. Like, there's a huge spectrum, and although those traumas aren't necessarily the same, there's a way of building relationships off of that and understanding, I guess, pain, or how shift and transformation happens. Right? Really, transformation.
Well, yeah, that's kind of why I like the word recovery, trauma recovery, because the focus isn't really, it's on the trauma, but it's mostly the recovery is the end game, trauma recovery. So no matter what kind of trauma, the intention is the recovery of it, the recovery of, pieces that you lost. And there's this really great story I'll just toss in. I don't know if I've told you this story. It's one of my favorite stories. But there was this amazing Navajo man, and I forget what his name is, but he was actually like a really famous artist. And he, I'm terrible, with like the actual names and stuff like that. So,
Me too.
but what happened was like before World War II, he decided he was going to leave his homeland, the USA, and his reservation, and he was going to go to Europe and go around Europe. So he did, and he met this amazing like German friend, and they were like the best bros, family. And then World War II hit, and Native people were used as code talkers, right? Because they spoke language and they could help the U.S. government, and it was really difficult for other countries to figure out, what they were talking about. But anyway, he ends up getting captured, this Navajo man, who's this really amazing young artist, beautiful, beautiful man. And he is severely tortured. I mean, to the point where they, take these big nails and nail his feet into the ground so he can't lay down, he can't sit. I mean, like extreme, extreme torture, because they knew that he was Native, and that he was probably involved with, codes and things like that. And he may have known more than he did. And then what happened was like, pretty much at his breaking point where he thought he was going to die, this German guy comes in, looks at him. He realizes it's his bro, it's his friend, that they've been traveling around Europe, and his family. And he had a SS uniform on, and he looked at him and he left, and he came back and he brought this food back, that had like kind of maggots and stuff in it. And it wasn't so much the torture, but this was the breaking point in the trauma for this Navajo man. And this SS officer who's supposed to be his friend is like shoving this food down his mouth, down his throat, that had maggots and stuff in it. And the Navajo man, shortly after that, he ends up getting rescued, and he doesn't get to see this German guy, doesn't want to see him. His spirit is completely broke, fractured. And they rescue him, and he goes on to live, and he goes back to his, his tribe. And there's a point where his tribe makes a decision that they're going to do trauma recovery, basically, that he has to call what they call his spirit back to his body, because his body can't function without his spirit. The spirit is gone because he's been so fractured and so harmed. And so they just tell him, like, look, dude, we really need you to heal. And we understand that, basically what we're going to put you through, if you don't call your spirit back, you're not going to survive it. And you're probably going to die. And that's okay, too, because then you'll be able to reincarnate back in as a young child and maybe, work through this. You know what I mean? Come back in a better body, come back in a better mind, and then, work through whatever has happened to you in this lifetime. But we really need you to call your spirit back. So literally he's in a wheelchair. He hasn't walked, since the torture period. And they take him out in this boat into this lake, and they really deep water. And the whole time he's freaking out. He's like, I can't swim. I can't use my legs. He's all that fear, is like, that's blocking the healing and all this other stuff. And he's just totally freaking out. And they said, we love you. And regardless of what happens, this is your journey and you have to make it, because we can't live with you the way that you are. We just can't do it. It's too pitiful. We can't watch this. So they throw him into the lake, and he starts to bloop, 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 bloop down. And he has a vision of this German guy, right? And the German guy is, basically standing in front of him while he's, going to the bottom of the lake. And he says to the German guy, like, the thing that traumatized him the most was, you were my friend. You are supposed to help me. And what you did was you went and got food that had maggots in it and forced me to eat it, like the worst kind of torture, when you were supposed to be my friend and my family, and then you did this to me. And what happened was is that in the vision, his German friend said, look, the only thing that I could do was get you food. And it was the only food that I could find. And I did it because I didn't want you to die. And there was this healing moment where, the Navajo guy realized, like, this guy really cared about him. But the only thing that he could do was focus in on getting some food down him. And it was the only food that he could find to keep him alive. And so he was doing it in a desperate attempt to keep him alive, because it was all that there was. And in that moment, that native guy, the Navajo man, started using his legs, and he, all of a sudden, his spirit came back into his body, and he swam to the surface. And then he went on to be this amazing, famous native artist with his life.
That's a great story. And I think you have told that one to me before. And I think it's so relevant towards healing arts. And there's a couple keywords that I wrote down that I really like out of this, is where dissociation happens, where there's that out-of-body experience, and how our bodies naturally do that, or how they repress within the psyche, how it represses information, represses stuff that we often have to recover or don't want to recover. So we dissociate from. And at the end, how perception is so important in the healing process, because so often what we think things are so wrong. And when we fall into that space of judgment, we deplete ourselves. We prevent ourselves from being able to heal. And I was listening to something, or another podcast maybe yesterday, and they were talking about something similar where, what's the term? Psychosomatic, correct? So so often many of our diseases and our illnesses are psychosomatic, which means that they're in our heads, right? Or it's all made up, or it's this projection of our reality. And that projection of our reality is based on the perception of what things are possible and what things are not. Yeah, I really like it a lot.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree with all of that. That, that sometimes we have to, I had a guru friend of mine who was really about the story and what we make in our story, and that our story is like theater, it's not even real. And that, and then we forecast, by making stories, up for our future. And all of it is from, a place of trauma and disassociation, as if, the things that happened to us didn't happen. And also, too, I just want to say right here that anybody that listens to this is that you don't really have to go through, in the process of healing, the level in which you go through, you don't really have to suffer a lot of the pain. It's your choice in the recovery. It just depends on, how good of, the healing types of venues that you're using are. But there shouldn't be, a lot of suffering that goes along with the healing process. Because once the right hemisphere is activated, which is the present moment, whether, that's why I think art is probably really magnificent for that, because it activates a part of your brain that you haven't been using, which is kind of more like your God, omnipresent part of who you are. And once you have certain kinds of trauma, that right hemisphere just shuts down and you have no access to it. And it deals with symbology, symbolic language, the present moment. It's where we spontaneously heal, or we don't. If we can't heal the physical body of disease if the right hemisphere is not participating in the present moment, because you're just trapped in a loop from the past to the future to the past to the future. kind of a thing.
I think you're the first person to introduce me to that concept in terms of healing, when through like the rebooting process, right? Where you find a way to engage the body and the brain, but you reconnect the right and the left hemispheres, where you re-engage those connections so that the body and the brain function in alignment with themselves so that they can heal effectively. But if the brain's not talking to itself correctly, I think this is what you told me, if the brain's not talking to itself correctly, it can't speak to the body correctly, and then also can't heal as well.
Yeah, because it's just a computer. Your brain is a computer hard drive, right? And it has all the information on how to regenerate the whole body. And that's, like its big function, kind of a thing. Oh, is Axe talking to you?
Yeah.
I can hear him. Yeah. So, so I mean, it's all about the right hemisphere and what's going to be able to, awaken it and open it. I mean, some people, do ayahuasca, there are dreaming medicines that people travel down, to have experiences. But some of those experiences too can be just as post-traumatic stress disorder that people need to be recovered from. Not everybody has like a pleasant experience with that. But, you always want to lean towards, there's so many amazing things that are out there for people to start recovering, recovering all parts of themselves. So, I mean, we're not recovering the trauma, we're recovering the particles of ourself, that are away from us. And in shamanism, and the traditional types of shamanism that I've studied, I work with 8 different bodies. You have a physical body, you have a ether body, you have an astral body, you have all these different bodies, but the one that is the most, damage in our world, and not so much damage, but broken away, is the emotional body. The emotional body just breaks away and it goes somewhere else. And sometimes it takes a lot of work to get that emotional body close to the person's body so that they can actually start using that right hemisphere, because, that right hemisphere is very feeling based. People don't really understand how they feel. They can't really put words to it. And this is because there's just this huge distant relationship with the emotional body, not even being close. I remember I went through this healing process reboot that I do on people, and then I went to school for it. But when I was going through the process of it, there was some really traumatic stuff in my past. And every time I would go through this reboot, I would be creeped out because I thought that there was like some spirit or entity that was following me, and it would be like right behind me, and I turn around to look and I wouldn't see it. And for days it would follow me around, and I got really to the point where I was just really creeped out. And then one day I just had this total nervous breakdown of all this emotional stuff surfacing. And I realized it was my emotional body. It finally had gotten, every time I was getting rebooted, it was getting closer and closer and closer to integrating with me. But it was floating around behind me, and it scared me because it was coming closer and closer and closer, as I released the emotional stuff. But I think with the right hemisphere, definitely have to connect it up, to the right hemisphere. And, there's been a lot of, did you ever see any of that what was his name? Bernie Siegel. He was that famous surgeon, Love, Healing, and Miracles or something like that. He wrote books. And he realized that people weren't healing. And so he started, putting them, if he was going to try to recommend chemotherapy, first what he'd do is he'd have them go home and draw a picture of how they felt about chemotherapy. And then if they brought the picture back and it was all black and it was death and poison and, whatever the right hemisphere or subconscious mind was conveying, if it was really bad, he wouldn't put them through chemo because he knew that the chemo was going to kill him, because that's what their subconscious mind believed.
Interesting. Yeah, it primes them almost to either succeed or fail within the healing process. So
Yeah.
you're right. Some of it's unconscious. And getting to know the self is a really challenging thing. What is it, like 95% of our behavior or our awareness is unconscious. So when we try to think and we try to process and we try to make sense out of the body healing and integrating and exploring how to, I guess, change or shift or release trauma, that can be really difficult to do. Especially, like you said, if you're starting to go through the healing process and the emotional body, if it's stored within the physical body, if things are released that you didn't know were there and they start coming up, it can be very overwhelming. And then what do you do? And then how do you do it? And it's all in layers and different steps. And
Yeah, one of my guru friends called it the perception breakdown. He said, you're not having a nervous breakdown. You're having a perceived reality breakdown.
That makes a lot of sense too.
Because your reality that you've been living is not real and wholesome. So you have to break down, get a new perception. So so in some of your work, or in your work, have you ever seen anything really, really profound in art that somebody has produced that made you just kind of go, oh my God?
It's an interesting question, because you talked a little bit about the other guy who had used art as a tool to uncover things that are already there, and getting to do art with the at-risk youth population or kids who have gone through really traumatic experiences. Some of that artwork is pretty complex at times. Some of it's very disturbing, some of it's very fantastical, some of it's very linear. It just depends on the person, but it's interesting to see how a person can communicate with art in ways that they can't with words, and in how I like watching the consciousness shift with them, or when they're creating artwork and they're beginning to understand what it feels like, or if they're given permission to create whatever it is that they feel, there's a shift that you can see. I don't know, that part of it I think is when it's like little wake up calls, or like if you have a really good dream and you wake up from it and you have this kind of aha or epiphany or ephemeral feeling that's really fleeting. I don't know, I feel like that's my favorite relationship to art and other people.
Yeah, there was a kind of a key thing that you were talking about, but I could see, how helpful it would be for children to do therapeutic type artwork because they don't have a vocabulary yet. I mean, I find a lot in my practice that most people, even as adults, haven't really been given a proper vocabulary, that they can express, what's going on with them.
Right.
And this is the other thing that really blows me away is I read this book recently by this researcher, and he was talking about kind of some of the concepts that I've been working with, for 30 years with people's brains. Because it is brains. It isn't a brain. It's brains. You have two brains, and they have two personalities, and they do completely two different things. So one of the things that he was saying was that he was talking about, pain relief, in dealing with people's physical pain, and, basically came to the hard line that, what medicine is doing, you can't treat people's pain the same, because depending on where that, information is sitting in the brain is going to dictate how the person responds to pain. So the average person, you can say, okay, so, you hurt your, sprained your ankle, and they twist it a little bit. And they're like, so if I touch here, what's the pain level, 1 being minimal and 10 being the highest? Well, if the pain or trauma or whatever else that it is is sitting in the left side, right, in the left side of the brain somewhere, then the person, may be able to say, wow, that's like an 8, right?
Right.
But most people, it's in different parts of their brain. So you may have people who have it in kind of the back rear part of the brain, kind of in the what they call the vomit part of the brain. And so whenever pain's activated in their body, they vomit, right? They just go through periods where they just spend a lot of time vomiting. And that's what happened to me with my brain cancer. When the pain would get so severe, I would just vomit. I wouldn't really feel pain on a scale from 1 to 10. It would just be vomiting. It was how my body kind of dealt with the pain. And then I've seen people in my practice where, they don't have a vocabulary for what's going on with them, and they may be emotionally out of control. They may have like where they're anger and they're hostile and they're throwing things, and then they go through big crying spells and they're just like emotionally out of control. And that is a response to physical pain that they're going through. And so you see like how all these things develop in different parts of the brain. So, I mean, even just trying to ascertain whether the person has pain, what kind of pain they have, and then, how they should be treated. I mean, because a pain pill is not going to help somebody who doesn't actually feel the physical pain part.
Right.
They're going to need some other kind of therapy if they're going through the emotional part, where it's causing a lot of emotional disturbance, in their life and the people around them, where they start kind of getting sent towards, psych evaluations instead of the, pain management.
I think pain management is really important. And I think what a lot of people don't understand, or at least what we're not taught in Western medicine, is that pain is something that is a sensation that is felt or at least registered within the brain. We don't necessarily feel pain in the body. We have pain receptors that send information up to the brain, and then the brain tells us that this is pain or this hurts. But like you're saying, that pain response is conditioned, where it's paired at some point or another along the line with something that either reinforces or gets a person out of a situation that could be harmful to them. And I saw something really interesting too. Just how people relate to the expression of pain, especially in the healing process, because a lot of our conditioned behavior is driven by attention, or it's attention maintained behavior. And so in the healing process, if we're giving attention to the wrong behaviors or to the wrong sources of what we think those are coming from, we're in the long run making problems worse instead of making things better. And I've seen how art can be a good way to give people, I guess, that language, or to give people different tools, even music especially, to discharge that emotional energy. Because if we're feeling pain is an energetic response, right? It's an impulse in the brain that's generated through electricity, which is energy. And if that energy generated through that brain impulse isn't given an outlet or isn't given somewhere to go, then it's buried into the subconscious, and it comes out in all these crazy manic ways, or ways that we call disorders. But if we're redirecting that energy channel into something more creative, or to that creative process that connects us to that brain, then we get better responses, right? We can more control that behavior. We can get the desired results that we're looking for when it comes to healing and new behavior. But it's really, really challenging, because so much of our healthcare system isn't taught how to do things at such a basic level. We're not taught basic behavior. We're not taught, or a lot of our doctors aren't taught basic nutrition. And if you don't understand how people relate to themselves and to their environments, and you don't understand how food and health, or how food fuels or affects the system, then you're not necessarily healing the body. You're not healing those 8 bodies. Maybe you're trying to heal one body, but what about the rest of them? And then how do you know which is which?
Yeah, those are some super good points. And like I always tell people, like B12 is essential, because if we're dealing with the electrical system, right, that connects us to lots of things, connects the brain to the body, connects us to the spirit, right, connects us, both sides of our brain together, because they send electrical signals back and forth. This is how they communicate. Then, like things like B12 missing in your diet is a serious deal, because it coats the nerve passages in order to be conductive, to send information through the body and outside of the body. So if you don't have a basic B12, which is a bacteria, it's a bacteria-related nutrition. So even the stuff that you buy on the markets is helpful, but it's, once your food's completely washed over and over, even if it's organic, it doesn't have that bacteria in it anymore. So you're not actually getting biological B12. And most people are super depleted. And we wonder why mental illness is really on the rise. And a lot of it has to do with, B vitamins, or what I call silent nutrients. But so I have a new statement now. I liked your, so my new statement now is attention driving behavior. Who's driving your car?
Yeah. Who's driving? Yes, exactly. Especially on that etherical, spiritual realm too, right? What entities or what energies do you allow into your space, or who influences your space and your decisions too?
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. So so either in your own life or your own experience, or, being kind of a witness to somebody else's experience, have you witnessed a really profound healing or turnaround in someone or yourself? And then, kind of talk about that, maybe using art, or somebody discovering something and then, watching their life change, or, how it unravels. Do you have any stories like that?
I guess a few.
Cool.
I guess I'll talk more about my own personal journey, since I have the firsthand experience from it. And I don't know, witnessing somebody else's healing thing is, I think, a little bit different than going through your own, although both are very impactful. But I think the first big aha that I had within the healing arts, I had gone to a woman named Jan Antonelli, who was is a cranial sacral and soul memory worker. And as what is going on here? But it was the first time that I understood the energetic threads outside the body, and how I guess those tension points are somewhat interrelated. But I really like the non-invasiveness of it, and how much of that healing process allowed me to be in control of my own, but through her soul memory work as well. She had told me that I had something like 470 entities attached onto my being, and no wonder why I was having a hard time understanding or knowing who I was and making decisions for myself. And I was like, what are you talking about? But it made sense in the way that it was explained to me through some of my own past, not only within my own, but within family members, not only of my generation, but of the previous 2 generations that I've known, have dealt with suicide. And in trying to recover from those things, what I've learned is that through the energy systems and then through the chakras, if you have these thoughts or if you take these actions to want to harm the self or to harm the body, you open up these energetic portals or these vortexes within the systems. Or I was told with this one where it opens up within the solar plexus, which is our identity and ego. And you leave these wide open gaps. So you have these different energies and entities, or whatever you want to call them, demons. Again, it depends on the rhetoric, depends on the language, the conditioning, perhaps the religion. But it opens up an energetic space for these things to come in, and they inhabit the body and they inhabit the self, and they start driving some of our interactions, or they start driving our thoughts and responses. And learning how to connect to myself through this energetic spiritual channel, or this relationship to things outside of myself, it allowed me within myself to have that aha, we got to close off these channels and protect energies. Another one of those came to me through an astrologer friend of mine, Timothy Glenn, who in a life purpose reading had pointed out to me that my moon being in Pisces makes me an emotional sponge, right? This is all language and how we learn to talk to ourselves, not so much religious belief systems. But if my moon is in Pisces and I am an emotional sponge, I'm already on an emotional, energetic level set up to be absorbing or absorbent of other people's energies and things. And being an artist, or primarily a visual artist, this gave me, I guess, the metaphors to create the visuals in my head to connect to my conscious body in such a way that gave me power or control over myself. Or it gave me that the next step to get out of victim mode to go into survivor mode, or going from survivor mode into a thriver mode, right? Or just understanding that I can relate to myself with language and words differently than how I've been taught and than how I've been raised. Because so often I find in trying to talk about this stuff, or even in calling myself an artist, right? People have these really complex ideas, or these conditioned ideas in their head of what those types of people already are. They project their judgments out. So how then do you turn that language around to try to connect with people? Because is it a matter of seeing spirits, or hearing voices? Because careful which professionals you're talking to. If you're talking to a psychiatrist, they might call it through different dissociative disorders or schizophrenia or things like that. But there are these very confining or limiting terms that really only address one aspect or one of those bodies that you're talking about, mostly our material body. Because in our society and our culture, we've detached from or dissociated from spirit as a whole. It's hard enough for us to connect to spirit on an individual level, when as a collective, we're disconnected from that. Or when we're I guess taught that we shouldn't go down this other road, or we're taught divisive language, right? That prevents us from not only being able to connect with others, but from being able to connect with ourselves.
Yeah, I like to call that separatism language.
Yeah.
And it does, and the other thing too is like there's always a like. One of the things that a lot of my native teachers have always taught me is that there's always a like, right? So for example, we can talk about, parasitic energy beings, But in the like, we also have parasitic, we have positive and negative parasitic beings that live in our body. You know, sometimes we can get a negative one, like a hookworm or something like that, but it's the same, right? It's the same. And usually if people have a lot of things like that going on, that pretty certain that they might have some parasitic energy beings as well, because there's like a 64 dimensional layer that we live in, you know, in our holographic, you know, experience or whatever we want to call it. And so, for example, if you have, you know, worms, like subtypes of worms that are not positive for your body, then you're going to have energetically those same kind of beings and attachments in the 64 layers. So there's always a like, but we like to separate, you know, even the spiritual language from the physical, like nutrient language as well. But there's a like there. If you have one, you're going to have the other. It's just how it is. And so there's always like signals and signs dealing with your physical health and what's going on with your physical health that are indications on, you know, what's going on in your energetic levels as well. And one time I did a session years ago, like 25 years ago, where they were talking about how, like, even just our liver in this holographic body, you know, this, what we call the physical world, could have up to 350, you know, parts to it in the 64 dimensional layers that we occupy while we're here physically. So you could have different kinds of beings that are helping with your liver, helping with regeneration, or that are a liver, but that's, you know, in an energetic form, right? That helps to keep. So sometimes you can actually, you know, help people. If nothing else works physically, you know, you can go into some of these layers and you can actually reactivate, say, the energy of that liver, you know, from one of those levels or layers. So I always tell people, like, you know, whatever's going on in your physical health is probably going on in your spiritual health or your energy health, because it's like. So if you have a lot of parasitic beings, you probably have a lot of parasitic solid beings inside your body. You probably have like an imbalance of positive ones against negative ones.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that through some of the work that I do the aura, quote unquote, aura drawings or biofield drawings of people, where I use chalk pastels to draw out the energetic field around people. And I do this through a process where I've learned that certain energies feel like certain colors, or I pair a color with certain frequencies. And it's been interesting because I can pick up on things like illnesses, and they come through as like a dark brown or gray, or like this really dense, murky energy. And it's not necessarily color that I see, but I think it's what you're speaking to, where it's the vibrations, right? Or it's this energetic, the symbiotic relationship that we have with these different energy beings around us that come through and affect our energetic field. We just call it being ill, or we perceive it in different ways.
Yeah, my neighbor teacher, Bovido, used to always talk about, he passed in 2016, but his big thing was always about being in balance on multiple levels, all levels, which means that you kind of have to be, you know, like unified, a unified being. But he even said, like, you know, you got to be careful of the seesaw, you know, like being in the light all the time can actually be detrimental, you know, and being in the dark all the time can be detrimental. But that, you know, the path is about both of them being in balance, so they're not at war. So even with your body, you know, you have good beings, you have bad beings in your energy field, but sometimes eradicating what you think is wrong actually could cause an empty space and an imbalance, right? Instead of bringing it into balance. And same thing with the body. People go on too many like heavy duty parasitic cleanses and they eradicate all the good microbes. And the microbes, your body can't live without the proper microbes, because the microbes actually eat away, like in a compost, they eat away all of the stuff that's old and doesn't work, and they reformulate it into something positive for the body. So, just with a lot of the stuff that I've worked with, I've really tried to stay in balance and really try to work where, I'm not, leaving more holes and more empty spaces, but trying to figure out how we could even call it, the polarity of positive and negative. How do we get them kind of aligned and balanced on the seesaw? So it's a straight across seesaw instead of it being up and down all the time.
That makes sense. Yeah. And because what I see a lot at my table, or when I do work with people, there's that wanting to jump towards judgment. Is that good? Is that bad?
Hey, Kelsey, sorry, we're at break. So do you want to mute and come back at one after? And we'll totally finish this conversation.
Yeah, you got it.
Into the second hour. Okay, break. Be back.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
Why am I here?
You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here.
You haven't answered my question.
The Matrix is older than you know. As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation.
Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lasan.
Collision Course is back. Schedule will be on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers, real researchers, truthful answers, and a place to engage with questions. Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio.
Hey, everybody.
And now we return you to...
I think it's over. I think the commercials are over, so I'm just going to roll. Sounds like the wind is gone. Anyway, hey, this is Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. I am your host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. And we are on the Wednesday show, which is a new addition to my days of shows. I usually am on Saturdays from 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Studio A. And today, also, my Wednesday show is also on Studio A. And it is from noon on Wednesday to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are on the second hour now. And I get caught up, when we go to break, if it's a super good conversation. I'm having a really good conversation today with a friend of mine, Kelsey Sweet here. She's from the Reno area like me, and our paths have crossed, and finally, had time to be able to get her on my show so that we could talk healing and art and all these amazing things and have like a mental powwow. So, Kelsey, are you there?
I'm ready to mental powwow.
Yeah. So, okay, go ahead and continue on, about what you were talking about, if you remember.
Sure. We were talking about the seesaw, or that spectrum, and maintaining balance, right? And getting people out of this place of good versus bad, negative versus positive, that kind of a thing, and how to find that space of equilibrium or neutrality. And I think so often people like to jump to one thing or the next, and they always go to, is this good? Is that bad? Like you were talking about earlier, the doctor who has the cancer patients draw out their thoughts on chemo, whether or not they think it's going to be good or whether or not they think it's going to be bad, right? Like those unconscious belief systems come through. And if we believe something to be good or bad, then that ultimately dictates or affects the outcome. Like if we are creators of our own reality, right? And we have these deep-seated beliefs that, this is bad and this is not going to work and this isn't going to happen. Or I hear this a lot as an art teacher, I'm not an artist, I'm not a creative person. Then we're already setting ourselves up for failure. When ultimately, as human beings, as species, we're meant to procreate, right? Like we come here out of creation, like our cells recreate themselves, our bodies generate themselves and do this, right? Without our necessarily conscious will of it. Again, depending on your belief systems, right? Some people believe there's reincarnation where we choose to enter this body, or our soul choose to enter this body to go through these experiences and to have these certain traumas to teach us something, so we can elevate ourselves, or we can continue to traverse through these multi-dimensional planes that we exist on. Or, some people believe, that we just come here and we die, right? We're not creators, we are destroyers, we are these parasites, we are these bad things, we are these horrible entities. Or we look at the other, right, or that separate idea. We look to somebody else to think that, well, they're bad because they do this, or we believe that they believe this, so therefore they are bad, right? Because we also not only set ourselves up for success or failure, but set other people in our environments up for success or failure through these ideas too of good or bad or right and wrong. which ultimately can create or destroy, right? If it's the language that we choose to use, who's in control. If our soul is in control and we get to create the world that we live in, or I went to the IONS conference recently, a few weeks ago, and I got to see Deepak Chopra speak. And at the end of this, he tells us that there is no such thing as the universe. It's all just a dream, right? It's all just a projection of a collective, agreed upon, unconscious idea of what something is. You know, it creates this world of infinite potential where anything can happen. But if we approach healing, or if we approach ourselves or other people with this idea that something is good or something is bad, and we think that we should be somewhere else before we should get something or should have something, blah, 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 then we limit ourselves in terms of the realities that we can create. But I think, to speak to what you had been talking about, if we meet people where they're at on their level and can inspire within them the idea that they get to know themselves and that they can be sovereign, self-healing individuals, they then can know on their path within their journey what will work and what won't work. But it's a tricky line we walk in, because again, this environment that we're set up into doesn't necessarily communicate with that language and can be very destructive towards that language. Or I like the butterfly metaphor a lot, where I feel like there are the humans that exist in the world that are very much like caterpillars, right? Like if a caterpillar goes into a cocoon, it has these caterpillar cells inside of it because it thinks it's this caterpillar. And then Timothy Glenn gave me this analogy, and I use it all the time now. Within that cocoon, we have these new little butterfly cells that start to emerge. We have this new language, this new understanding that seems to come from nowhere. It's programmed somewhere within the genetic code that this alchemy or this transformation happen. And when these butterfly cells start coming in, the caterpillar cells attack it. They start attacking because it's new and it's foreign, and they don't want to give up the space that they exist in to these new butterfly cells, because it's this perception that it's something that's different, that something that it's separate, although it comes from the same organism and it's all contained within this cocoon. And eventually, these butterfly cells and these ideologies that we have, right, they start to consume and consume and consume, and they slowly push out the caterpillar cells, so that eventually what you have is the butterfly that emerges, and those ideas solidify and they break through the barrier, right? They let themselves out of this box, and then from there they can fly, right? They can get a higher perspective on what this process is like. But it's not a comfortable process. There's this battle that happens, but whether or not that battle is good or battle is bad, I mean, that's up to the person, right? That goes back to the brain and what we've learned, or what we've been conditioned to think is painful or is not painful.
Yeah, so that analogy is the past and the future left hemisphere. Right? It's the struggle to not be like the past, to be something different in the future.
Struggle is real.
Right, but there's no present moment in there, right? So the right hemisphere is not really activated as the omnipresent kind of a thing, right? So going back to like just how the brain works, that, you know, the right hemisphere is in the present moment, and that all things are, if they're brought into the present moment through the right hemisphere, then all things transform or are done or completed or, happen or manifest. But the left hemisphere loves this journey. You know what I mean? Like, it loves this. It has to, like, I think, and it keeps us more stuck in this cycle. For example, one of my teachers when I was 23 that I studied with, and it was a very difficult period because she was a native teacher. She was super powerful energetically, and she beat me up a lot just because I had a really hard time kind of grasping how simple some of these concepts are. But she said, here you have everything, right? If we believe all of this is a dream, then the left hemisphere has us stuck in the past and the present, and it's reoccurring. So our past will always be the same as our future, right? Because there's no present moment in it. There's no right hemisphere activation involved in it. So we never are in the present moment. We're always striving. This is like a long drawn out process. So she said that's the path of she said the right hand. So say we have this hero's journey, savior's journey, which starts with ourselves, that, we have to go on this long vigilance process of understanding, clearing, transforming, and all these other things. And she said, so that's this process that we've been led to believe that we need to have when, it's just a holographic experience, basically. But she said on the left hand is the day that we just understand and live in the now, in the present moment, where all of that other stuff just drops away and goes away, and we are, because that's what we are. We just are. And all of that, journey and all of that, discovery and all of that other kind of stuff just falls away, and we accept ourselves as we are in the present moment, exactly how we are. We stop being driven by ambition or need to be something else other than what we are. And it's taken me, quite a bit of my life to, get out of some of those. And I'm not saying, what I've done is best for everybody, but to get out of the seesaw process, from one side to the other, and these processes that are very, for me, imbalanced. They're seesaws, and cause a lot of discomfort and all these other things, because I just don't really want to go there anymore.
Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah,
I just want to be like I am, that I am because I am.
I like that a lot. And I went through a couple of rounds of dialectic behavior therapy several years ago. And in that, there's a lot of neurolinguistic reprogramming, where you relearn how to talk to yourself in a therapeutic way. And one of the terms that we learned in that is radical acceptance, which is what you're talking about, where when the really, really shitty thing happened to you in your life, at the end of the day, like, you can't do anything about it. You have to accept that experience happened to you, and you have to integrate it into your life and find a way to move on, move forward, grow, heal from that experience, or find different ways to relate to that. And that can be a really difficult thing for people to do, because they don't want to break through the ego, right? They don't want to break through the idea of the world that they created. They don't want that to fall apart, because they become vulnerable. Then, you create a reality that you're not familiar with. And then what do you do?
Yeah, but it's that right hemisphere, it's that feeling. So even the negative feelings are essential, you know what I mean, to communicating with our right hemisphere, positive or negative. And that's how, it's interesting, because a lot of the new agey stuff, I try not to fall into the new agey stuff. I specific have, my path, and I've gone off my path several times in my life, and I have now. I'm strictly on it. That's it. I don't divert into something else that looks golden and shiny. I'm like, nope, I just stay the course. But I just totally lost my train of thought. about what I was going to say. Anyway, I've got a lot of thinking going on, which is really good. That means it's a really good show because,
there's a lot to talk about. With all the different layers of existing and how it all forms back into creation and that creative process and the healing arts, like it really is really complex. And I think as complex as it is, it's really not. You just like you're saying, allowing yourself to go with the flow and staying with the course and showing up and doing the work because it feels right. I think if you can get the mind and the thought process out of that, right, there's a lot you can learn from and can grow from. But I think those negative experiences are important to have in order to understand what the good experiences are, which is why we have them, right? You can't really know one without the other. And one I like to use this one with my students a lot too. One of my favorite bands, Modest Mouse, has a song called The View. And this song has helped me through some pretty tough moments. But there's a line in there where it goes, "If it takes shit to make bliss, then I feel pretty blissfully. And if life's not beautiful without the pain, well, then I'd rather never even see beauty again." So as far as that spectrum and that balance goes, with the highest highs come the lowest lows. And we've gotten ourselves into a culture where we call that bipolar disorder, or we want to, I don't know, we have a very, I think, skewed way of trying to resolve that experience or to allow for it because we want so badly to be balanced, right? Where we almost force people into this place where they feel balanced all the time. But in forcing a balance, I guess, or forcing, my experience is like this, therefore yours has to be like this too. You get either suppression or oppression that happens, or you get the opposite. You get something more volatile and explosive. But at the same time, is it good, bad, necessary?
Yeah. Well, and indigenous cultures, a lot of my friends, like my friend Mwangi Hassan from Africa, he's a traditional healer. They do traditional ceremonies of possession and stuff like that to heal people, heal the land, to summon the information from the ancestors and stuff. And a lot of my indigenous friends will say that, they look, the way that their societies look at mental illness is that you are misaligned with your ancestors and you're not doing your work. You're not doing the work that you were designed to do, genetically. And that what happens is that your own ancestors and spirits will start working against you and they make you crazy. And so that's what Mwangi Hassan will tell me, so for him, sometimes dealing with, mental illness, and he's gotten to go speak at the Orthos convention, or these big medical conventions in Germany and stuff like that on some of his processes of healing, where he's actually starting to work with medical doctors in, the other parts of the world, using they have a little bit of a network of indigenous healers there in, where is he at? He's in Uganda, and that they work with the doctors. And so they know when the person needs medical treatment. So they send them to the doctor. And when the doctor can't figure out what to do with the people, he sends them out to them, right? Because, they usually can sort out what the medical doctor can't figure out, which is kind of, unusual. But there are a lot of these things that are kind of been in place for a really long time, kind of a concept. But anyway, usually long before this, I have my guests public information in case, you get a lot of emails and things like that you don't want to have in your private email server. So, where can people find you in your social media? Like if you have a website, what your Facebook page is, anything that you have where you post a lot of the work you're doing or information?
I have tried to put most of everything that I do onto kelseysweet.com, KelseySweet. It's kind of my umbrella, I guess, that has links to my social media pages and some of the projects that I've been working on, and a blog that I've been working to get activated and that sort of a thing. I just got accepted for studies to, I haven't even told you this, but through the California Institute of Integral Studies, they accepted me for a program to pursue my PhD with them as well. So I'm kind of shifting gears and trying to realign myself to fit that mold, or now that I've got kind of a goal as far as where my research can go, more of that information will fill in and things will become a lot more solid. But KelseySweet.com is a good place to find me. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and those sort of things too. But for the most part, you can find all that information at my website.
Great. I love school. I love school. I love learning things that I couldn't learn anywhere else. Like, this year I'm in that herbal medicine program, which will probably go through next, I think, March or something like that, totally. But I love it. I love it. I love it.
I like learning as well, and I'm really grateful for the professors and the faculty at the school for opening themselves up for my projects and those sort of things, or at least giving me the platform to explore art through a doctorate level mindset in some form or another, find some sort of way that I can integrate art into that, because you can't get a PhD in art unless it's awarded to you if you're Marina Abramovich or something like that. But I mean,
yeah, well, that's great, because you kept saying, I wish I really knew what I was supposed to be doing right now. And now, boom, here it is. You asked enough and you got it.
Yeah,
there you go.
It gives me a goal. I don't like paying for it, of course, but I'm kind of sucked into the system where I don't really have any other choice but to go this route. And if anybody wants to help fund that research in any sort of way, I'm more than open to taking investors as well. So
Yeah. Always. Donations are good. So I was going to just kind of talk, because a lot of the things, so this is kind of like an experience that I had that was taught me a lot of things about like emotions, right? And healing and all kinds of different things. So in 2000, and it astonished me, right? Because we have vocabulary, and then we have, vocabulary for emotions. And even for me, it showed me like how distant that I was from the words that I used for different emotions to what I actually thought or related to those emotions. And what I found was that, most of us, live in derogatory emotions, but a lot of us can't even identify that. People can't really identify if they're sad or if they're sorrow or if it's grief. There's these different kinds of words that express different types of levels of information and different layers of information, which are emotions. So emotions are information, right? They provide us with information about what's going on in the chemistry of our body, what's going on physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But I think it was like in 2000, I finished the program. I was in Austin, Texas, and I had just finished the brain rebooting program that I went to reboot people's brains into whole brain activity, which does amazing things. It can cure addiction. It can arrest disease. It can totally change the whole chemistry of the body, drop it into a very alkaline state out of acid. It's amazing. It really does a lot of amazing things, and you just facilitate it, and the brain takes care of the rest for the individual person, and everybody experiences it completely different, just, mind-boggling. But I had it done for 2 years, went through the process of that, healing work and integration, and then decided to go to school for it. But I was at the end of the program. The program was in Texas. I had gotten a job I had a job with some fairly high profile family who had, health conditions. And so for 1 week a month, I would travel to the school, do the school hands-on. Then I would come back for 3 weeks, write my papers, do a lot of other stuff. But I was given free room and board and food. And I was like a private health chef for this family, where I would create whole meals that all of them could sit down and eat, and all of them had, different health conditions. So I was really grateful to them during that process. But at the end, I decided, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to Reno, if I wanted to go back to school, if I wanted to take some time off. Money was a big concern. Didn't really know what was going on. So I decided to sit down and do a dream board. And just see, what was going to happen from that. And what happened was I decided to do an emotional dream board, kind of not about possessions or manifesting anything, but how I wanted to feel, right? So I went to the store and got like 15 magazines, looked through them before I bought them, and literally cut out pictures of people's expressions, right? So I brought it home and I cut everything out, and I glued all these expressions people had on their faces onto the board. And then I wasn't really sure what to do about it. So anyway, I ended up coming back to Reno. So everything went into a box. And it was like this was in 2006 or 2007. And so probably around 2011, I was digging through the boxes and I pulled out this dream board. Well, the problem is that nothing really had manifested in my life that would cause me to have those expressions, right? And one of the things that finally dawned on me was that how do you have something, even if you can see it on someone's face, when you have a disassociation to it? And so I kept looking at the dream board and all the expressions on the people's faces. And there was this one that was in the middle. And it was of this, person who had won a gold medal or something like that. And they were on their knees and just the expression of just bliss and joy and relief, and, all these emotions that this person had getting there, right? And getting to the end and how they felt and just the look on their face. And I had in the middle of the board, I just couldn't figure out, the dream board. I'm like, well, these dream boards just aren't working. So I'm looking at it. I sit down. I even smoked a joint while I was looking at it, just to be trying to figure it out. What did I do wrong with the dream board? Why didn't it work out? And then it dawned on me. Almost every single expression of people on the dream board was of joy. But I had never had anyone in my life who had ever expressed joy. So I was totally disconnected from what joy looked like in this world. It was something I wanted to have. I see it on other people, but I didn't have the word with the look, the experience, and the feeling connected.
I wonder how common that would be kind of within society, because you said that these pictures are things that you found out of magazines, and how authentic are those expressions to those people that are really experiencing them? And
well, that's I think what it manifests into is that, people are looking through these magazines and they want that happy look on the face, but it's the person standing next to this car, or it's a person that has a diamond ring on and is married, or has a new diamond necklace, or has, victory from, something that they've accomplished, or, whatever it's going to be. And so I think because we're stuck in the left hemisphere, is that we don't get the symbol of the happiness and connecting it up with joy in the right hemisphere in the present moment. But we understand it from a reptilian left brain perspective, which is the diamonds, which is the car, which is the this, which is the that. And so we're driven to get those things because we think those things are going to give us that feeling. And we don't know what that feeling is, right? We don't really know what that expression on that person's face is because we're disconnected from our own feelings and the terms that describe those different feelings.
Right. And we're fed that information regularly over and over and over again. So subliminal, and it just becomes so integrated.
Yeah. And then you get the thing, you work your buns off for 10 years to get the thing. And you're like, well, I'm not any more happy. I'm not anywhere closer to having that feeling, that expression, that emotion.
Right. The emotional freedom, right, or emotional intelligence. These are kind of new words that have come to the forefront. I think those are important things to learn. But you made a good point earlier as far as like the new age stuff as well, and how destructive the new agey things can be because it feeds something similar. It kind of gives this false idea that happiness comes through this idea that spirituality is using positive words and doing yoga and, you know, being vegan and eating healthy foods. And although those are things that can be helpful, it also doesn't allow people to experience emotion. I've been in several of those environments where if you're going through something challenging or traumatic, you're looked at as something that's toxic, or people don't know how to cope with their own negative emotions or those shadow sides, right? So they cast it off as something that's bad, or we're just not given the space where we really understand what emotions are, and even our own emotions. And what I like about art is it can tell us so much about ourselves if we just allow ourselves to make something. So, no, I'm not a great portrait artist, but when I sit down and I draw a self-portrait of myself, you know, and doing this over periods of different months or over periods of years, each of those self-portraits that I draw can tell me so much about what I'm going through at that moment that I don't even feel. Or seeing other people's reactions and responses to that can give me a lot of information about my own emotional body as well. It's an interesting way to experiment, but sometimes just allowing ourselves to get there can be kind of challenging. So we have to create alternate or all different, or learn how to access, I guess, different levels of consciousness, whether it's through smoking a joint, through dreams, meditation, other types of drugs, or just intentional practice, or opening up an art history book and looking for inspiration, whatever that part of it is. It's funny to me how much art in that creative process can really feed us information. Or I don't know if you're familiar with the spider study. I'm not sure like how real this research study really is, but I saw somewhere that spiders were given different sorts of drugs or different sorts of substances, and the outline of their spider web was, I guess, logged or correlated with the different type of drug that they were on. So like LSD would do one thing to the shape of the web, whereas marijuana would do something else to the shape of the web. So it's interesting when under the influence of different states of consciousness, or whatever it is, or however it is that we get there, of what our creations can tell us about ourselves too, that we can't really see. They're like these weird little mirrors into ourselves. Like colors, symbols, shapes, patterns, all of that sort of information is stuff that can cue us or like feeds us information, or that can drive our behavior. Like color especially affects us in so many different ways, whether we know it or not. And I talk to my students about this a lot too. Like, why is this art piece making you feel this way? Or if you want somebody to feel a certain way because you've created something, how do you do that? Right? What color choices do you use? You know, if you want to make somebody hungry, or if you want to increase appetite, use your oranges and reds. Or, you know, if you're upset and you end up in a mental institution or in jail, they might put you in a green room or a pink room because these are things that calm us down. So a lot of the times our emotions or things that we feel, right, they're sensors of information. Like those emotions are picking up on information around us that we might not be consciously aware of. And so we might be feeling all of these different things and we don't really know why. And if we don't understand that red can make us really anxious, and we've been standing in a red room for 2 hours, of course our heart rates are going to be elevated. Of course, we're going to be more tense. It's going to have an impact on us, whether we really want it to or not.
Yeah. So the other thing too that comes to mind is that, okay, so a color, and this is just kind of my perspective, right, is that the color that they're utilizing or atmosphere that they're creating is used to control the response of the right hemisphere.
Right. Right. We use different shapes and symbols and things, or sounds too. And I'm not sure if it has to do with something like with the number 7, or if it's like vibrations, frequencies, tone. But these are words that are used to describe color, but are also describe sound. So there can be different types of music or undertones or frequencies that can be used within an environment that also can have a control or an impact on a person as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my native teachers have always talked to me about that, there are colors and sounds and different things of different perspectives, like from the extreme that can kill you. There are sounds that can instantly kill you. Mm-hmm. And then there's our sounds that can instantly heal you. Yes. And so it comes back to that balance perspective.
And I wonder as well if visual art or if color or light can have a similar impact on people. And I would venture to say that it does. And we had talked earlier about how nutrition plays a big role in us as well. And I think like even just water, something as simple as water, can have a big impact on what we're feeling and how we're feeling, because water also conducts electricity and it carries intention and it carries frequency. And with my students in creating art with intention, we talk about the power of water or the power of substance to hold energy and to hold intention, whether it's holding the intention of a color, or, if it's red paint in the color of a swastika, right, or the shape of a swastika, that's going to hold a lot of power and energy behind it, because it connects us to our ancestors and it connects us to our history. And we understand that that has a very negative impact on people's visceral responses, right? I mean, depending on the environment and depending on the people. And whether we are aware of that or not, when it comes to the things that we're creating or speaking or drawing or producing in terms of sound or play, our intention, whether it's conscious or not, that energy is carried into that piece that we're creating. And if you look far enough back in history to our earliest ancestors, or the cave dwellers, if we go back to the times of shamanism and these levels of healing, it was the shamans who were the artists at the time. It was the healers that had the ability to I guess take down the information or to log the information in a permanent way, because these people understood the power in that creation. And if somebody wasn't taught or educated or didn't understand how trauma works or how the transformative experience works, then they're creating things out of ego or creating things that ultimately don't have evolutionary benefits for us as a whole. And we live in a society now where anybody, quote unquote, can make art. Anybody can do a thing. Anybody can just make a thing. We have these elitists who allow advertisers to manipulate and persuade us on a regular basis. And these aren't people who are healers or are people who are spiritually responsible. Like that power of the arts and of creation is being misused. So again, the intention that goes behind it is really important in anything that we create, whether it's the food that we make. And they say that if we pray over our food or if we talk to our plants when it's growing, it will serve us better. It feeds us better. It nourishes us better. And I think when it comes to the art process as well, if the true intention is healing, you can create a picture like Guernica, where it's a war and destruction and not necessarily aesthetically pleasing to everyone, right? You can have these immense pieces that can be very moving and very powerful, although they might be morbid or macabre. But that being said, too, you can have paintings that are of a beautiful woman or of a landscape or something that's beautiful, but if the intention behind it isn't good, right? Or if the intention behind it isn't meant to serve the evolution of humanity towards its highest good, then that piece does a disservice to us all, right? It doesn't heal us. This is why art can be healing as much as it can be destructive.
Yeah, I think that goes with everything. Anything that is not in balance, and I think it starts individually before it's collective, is we have to be in balance, finding a way to become in balance, whether through art or meditation or whatever it's going to be, eating, diet, food. And then that can kind of mirror out into the world a way that balance can be assimilated faster once we figure it out.
It can be really tricky because I know that through my own trauma recovery journey, ultimately, I'm the only person who can heal myself. I can go to all the professionals in the world to help me, but if I walk into each of those places thinking that they're going to do all the work or that whatever, like, I don't know, there's a balance there, right? Where although I need to be responsible for my own health and healing, there's also knowing or learning how to discern when and who to reach out to and what sort of relationships that you can build or what sort of symbiotic exchanges can happen that are mutually beneficial. And that can be a really tricky line in terms of, or I don't know, it can be really tricky on the healing journey. Maybe that's part of the healing journey, is learning which healers work for you and which don't and why.
Yeah, or, simple thing, like I always tell people, is that if you, want to cure your cancer, are you going to go to someone who looks sick, who's very overweight as a practitioner, who has never had any health conditions that they've had to overcome? And, and I mean, just visually, sometimes I think, like when we talk about disassociation, I mean, it is deep disassociation, because, we'll continue to go to a doctor who doesn't look really healthy or is super, super young and has never had any type of health conditions that they've had to overcome. And we expect this person to help us with our cancer when they don't have any experience of what that's like to overcome. And sometimes you have to be with people, at a certain level in order to bring you up to that area of where you want to be, that have already gone down that path, and sorted a lot of it out for themselves.
That's helpful on the healing journey, especially when you've gone through something really traumatic, is to know that the traumatic thing that you're experiencing or learning how to heal is going to be what ultimately is the thing that connects you to the other person who also has to heal, because you can't necessarily empathize with somebody if you don't know what it's like to go through with it.
Yeah, well, it's like, I have worked on and helped a lot of veterans, but I don't know what it's like. Even sometimes there's a lack in what veterans have available, to be able to help heal themselves or heal their journey. But ultimately, I may be a component of it, but they really need somebody who's made the whole journey and who's been through what they've been through. I will never know what it's like, I do not know what it's like to, put all that kind of military stuff on my back, to be under somebody's control, that I have to move and do exactly what needs to be said at their command. And that, that I'm carrying around a huge rifle or shooting a giant gun, and I'm decimating cities, and I'm killing people and women and children. I will just never know what that is. And so my ability to actually help somebody over that hurdle, like I could be a component, right? I could be a component of healing, but they need people who have made the transition. They need more people that can, go through healing processes, that can put it together, that can elevate another veteran to get through the healing process and make it more faster and rapid. I think because it's like, when you have kids, one of the things that I always notice about kids, like, people have their first kid, and then the kid may be a little bit, go through learning how to walk and talk and all that other stuff. But then once they have the second one is constantly looking at the first one, and that they learn how to walk in half the time. They're already talking in full sentences. They may eat more solid food faster, because they're watching the other kid, and the other kid is elevating their experience, right? So it's almost like there's this watchful program that goes on with the brain. So if somebody, like in the military, through their experiences, and they go through the whole healing process, they're going to be able to amplify and elevate, whoever that they work with in a much faster, rapid of healing and the process, because it gets simplified, as they go and they transition.
Yeah, it sounds like the energy or the rate at which they vibrate or the frequency is similar. And if somebody can match your frequency in terms of vibration, then you can accelerate the healing process.
Yeah, you can actually put it into their field, like computer chips and downloads, I think. Because this is what happens with plants. One of the things I got, it's really hard to shock me these days with anything. But I got really shocked by the Angelica plant because, and then my last show I had on Stephen Smith, and we talked about the spiritual, natures and spirits of plants and their abilities, depending on how you're tuned into your environment. And so we were on a hike with my teacher up into the mountains, the Sierra Nevada mountains. We camped up there for like 3 or 4 days, and we did plant ID walks and, eating plants and making wild crafting medicines and stuff. And there was the Angelica plant, and Angelica, the root is used in indigenous cultures for, spiritual ceremonies, mostly like ones where there requires a lot of dancing and prayer, and things of that nature, where maybe there's a little bit of, not eating food, maybe a little bit of dehydration, because you're working with the spirit for several days, and that they would eat the angelical root to give them stamina and endurance through these processes as a spiritual plant. So she took some of the leaf matter off and handed it to people, and I have a habit of sticking it in my bra. What I do is macerate whatever it is, put it in my bra, let it heat up. I can smell it, Also, it gives me a chance on that soft skin to see if I'm going to be allergic to the plant or not before I choose to like use it or ingest it. Because also too, if I'm going to cut up, plants, I'm going to harvest plants and I'm going to cut them up, I need to know if I'm going to have an allergic reaction to them or not, even if I'm going to be using them for medicine for other people, because I probably might not want to use those plants. So I usually put it in my bra just to see if I'm going to get a reaction. Well, 40 minutes later, mind you, I ate a lot of other plants. Whatever she'd pull off and hand to us, I would eat. I test drive everything. So about 40 minutes later, all of a sudden, I'm like I'm coughing, and people are like, "Are you choking on something?" I'm like, "No, I can't talk. My voice is super hoarse, and I can feel all this weird stuff like moving around on my lung on the left side." And then all of a sudden, I like finally cough up this like old, mucus ball from my lung, and my throat is like really hoarse. My voice is like really, really rough. People were like going to hit me on the back. I mean, it was that bad. I mean, everybody stood there and watched to see if I was going to be able to live or survive and what was going on. And I had to look back through my, 40 minutes of notes, or an hour and a half of notes through my book to see what plant I may have eaten that had something to do with lung, that was lungy. That's kind of like my language when I'm using plants. Oh, that's a lungy that's a lungy plant. Oh, that's a livery plant, and I couldn't find anything, and the only thing that correlated was the angelica leaves. And one of the statements that's used about it is it's to help you catch your breath. And so I had to talk to my teacher about that. And I said, do you think that, just by macerating these leaves and sticking them in there, especially like, in the lung area and the soft tissue where that plant could, be in my energetic field and also kind of go into my bloodstream, I said, do you think it could have that kind of a reaction where it would clear your lungs? She goes, oh, absolutely. Huh. You could just be around certain plants, just sitting with them and holding their leaf hand, and they can have a huge energetic impact on you. Hey, no. So the thing is like, it was kind of an experience that actually kind of was like, whoa. I mean, things can be that subtle, in the world that's operating around us. Like if we're dealing with water, we're dealing with plants, we're dealing with fresh food right out of the ground, because obviously lettuce loses all of its nutrient within 3 days after it's picked, and even organic lettuce, all the nutrient is gone by the time we get it at the supermarket. So even just dealing with water, the vibration of water, the vibration of soil, the vibration of plants can have beyond subtle, like impressions on us, that we have, but we're so disconnected from the natural world, trying to make something out of ourselves, is we miss like simple healing. And I think about people who do art, who draw nature, who go out in nature and draw it. I'm a terrible drawer. I'm just really always been horrible at it. But you know what? Give me some soil and I can create some amazing things. It's kind of like how it works for me. But I think about people that go out in nature and they, draw things and they try to capture, the experience of what that plant or that tree or that sunset or whatever else is trying to convey, and how unbelievably healing that must be, just being in that vibrational environment and just holding the attention, right, for a long period of time. Yeah.
It's a subtle experience, especially if you're out in the environment painting in the environment. It's plein air painting, right? Where the light is constantly changing around you, and the bugs are buzzing around, and the clouds are shifting and moving, and the flowers are opening and closing. You get to learn how to perceive, back to that word perception, right? You get to learn how to perceive the world around you in a very different way. And part of the art that I do is modeling for life drawing classes. And a lot of what that has to do is standing still for a long period of time, or even with some of my paintings, I'll sit for 4 hours at a time, right? Where you get into these really deep meditations where you start learning new ways of relating to the world, because your body just naturally starts to experience things different. Like if you've ever tried to stare at the same spot on a wall for 15 minutes, your things are going to shift and you might start hallucinating, or depending on how you're sitting, you might learn that you have muscles that fall asleep that you didn't even know that you had.
Yeah.
And
so not to cut you short, but we've got like 30 seconds left of the show. And I just really, I'm going to have you back on. It's been great. But could you tell people how to find you?
People can find me at kelseysweet.com. I'm also on Facebook. That's a pretty easy way to get in contact with me. KelseySweet is me. If you Google me, you'll probably find some aspect or some trail of me out there somewhere that you can, follow the path to where I am now. So
awesome. And so, hey, everybody, this has been Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, the Wednesday edition. Saturday, Dr. Linney and Mona Radler will be handling my show because I will be in the forest collecting plant medicine. But thank you for tuning in. Tune in again next Wednesday. I'll be back. And thanks, Kelsey Sweet, for being on the show. And we are over and out. Talk to you later, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Salty. Mama, salty.
It's chocolate.
Salty. Mommy,
you did such a great job while I was on the phone. High five. Excellent. That deserved 2 chocolates. Yeah, now we can play and hang out for a little bit. It's 11 o'clock. We've got a couple hours, like 2 or 3 hours until your teacher gets here. What would you like to do?
Bedside Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be
what would you
right
like
back
to
after
do?
this message.
You want to go play hide and seek outside?
Yeah.
Okay, here. Let me throw this strawberry chocolate away. I'm gonna throw strawberry chocolate away. I gotta plug in my phone. Hang on 1 second.
Welcome to Revolution Radio, where you, the listeners, are in charge. Here at Revolution Radio, we present 48 broadcast hours of news and information each and every day. Revolution Radio never sleeps. Revolution Radio is worldwide and borderless information. Revolution Radio is also commercial free. Revolution Radio is supported 100% by you, the listeners. And that's why we appeal to you to donate and support this station and its expenses. You can support us in many available options like archive subscriptions, our seed pack selections, or even my woodworking store. And we also even have Revolution Radio's swag at the Revolution Radio Zazzle store, in which you can get t-shirts, coffee cups, even a baby onesie. Or you can just plain donate to the cause. We cannot continue without your support, and your support is what helps pay the bills. So please, if you wish us to continue, please stop by our station support page and drop a dime on us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank or all